Okay, well, good morning. We are in the seventh parak Zayin, and we're going to go to Os Gimel. We're talking about the influence of the stars and two very important points about this discussion. Okay, so the stars impact our lives. Okay, so as we said, the stars are the lowest level that of the flow from God to the angels down to the stars, and the stars tell a certain story, and therefore all human beings, what I mean by a story is that they define a certain reality to some extent, and therefore every single human being that we are receiving our influence from the stars, are being impacted by them. Okay, according to the system, according to how things are set up, each person is going to be influenced by those stars. So what he's getting at over here is the fact that, and really I glossed over the last os, which I skipped over, and that is that the stars define to some degree our reality. In other words, there's really like two systems. There's a system where there's a chiddush, there's something new that's happening, something that's breaking nature. We'll call that a miracle. But outside of that, there is the natural order. And the natural order is that the stars are influencing our lives. And what that means when we think about astrology and in the more mystically inclined commentators, which again probably are the majority of our classical commentators, do believe that there is a reality to astrology, that the stars will define a certain reality. A person is born under a certain star. There's Gemaras that talk about a certain person being born under a certain star. They're going to have a certain types of characteristics, and they'll be able to, and if a person reads the stars correctly, they'll be able to tell a certain story about the individual born under that constellation. Obviously, you have to know what you're talking about. Whatever you see in the Baltimore Sun or whatever is obviously bogus, but there is a substance to the science. Okay. However, being that the stars are a system created by God, it's possible that something is going to break that. And regarding this, it says, we learned Masechah Shabbos a little while ago, Ein Mazel Yisrael. It says that there is no Mazel for the Jewish people. What that means is not that there is never any Mazel. What that means is it's possible, because our souls are rooted in such a high place, and because ultimately God has special divine providence over the Jewish people, as we spoke about. Therefore, a Mazel Yisrael, although there might be something which is coming to us from a natural perspective, God overrides, or God is able to override that, and therefore when we daven, anything of that nature, what we're asking for is that maybe nature should dictate this should be my reality based on my Mazel, but no, but a Mazel Yisrael means Hashem could override that, right? This is the famous Rashi quoting a Medrash which says about Avram Avinu. Avram says, I can't have children. Hashem says, go out of your constellation, go above your constellations, because Avram, our relationship is such that even though nature may dictate this is what's going to happen, I'm going to treat you differently, and that is something we inherited from Avram Avinu. Okay, so that is an important one of the important points. And then the other point that he makes is the rules of this influence. They are defined, and some of its ways could be understood by gazing at the stars. And this is what astrologers are able to do. Okay. At the end of the day, not everything is revealed to the people seeing the stars. In other words, there's a limitation to how much we're able to understand and appreciate. Therefore, the stargazers, those who are astrologers, are able to only get some of the understanding and not the full thing. So again, two very important pieces. One is astrology is real according to the mystics, and we are defined by our constellation. We're defined by what's happening out there. B, those who read the stars are never going to be able to get the full picture. They're able to get a general picture, okay? And C, very important, Yisrael is able, not always, but Yisrael is able to theoretically override what is naturally coming to us. Now, let's just address very quickly, what is the term Mazel Tov that we say, right? Mazel is constellation, Tov, it should be good. So what we're saying over there is the middle ground, is that there's something in the middle, and that is that, and this really goes to that Gemara in Shabbos, and that is that we are generally defined by our Mazel. However, Mazel is a direction, but not a defined direction. In other words, the Gemara gives an example. A person might have an inclination to bloodshed. It could go into one of two ways. Either they could be a murderer, or they could be a mohel. Okay? Bottom line is, depends how you use it, right? So we all have a nature to ourselves. We're thinking about it psychologically. We have a certain nature. How are you going to use it? Are you going to use it like, is being strong bad? No. It's how you use it, right? There's going to be a place for strength. So the point is, Mazel Tov, what we're asking for, we're davening for, is that the Mazel that we have will only be used for the good and not for the bad. We're not asking for God to override the Mazel. Specifically, we say it at a good time, because those big occasions are indeed influenced by the stars. When something big happens, we say, yeah, that was found in the stars. How do we know that? If you and I knew how to read stars, words, we'd see this event, but we're asking God, Mazel Tov, let it be influenced to the good and not to the bad, because nothing is entirely good or bad, everything's neutral, and therefore we're saying that yes, this is defined, to some degree we're limited by Mazel, but we're davening that it should be used and it should be affected in a positive way. That's what we're saying, we say Mazel Tov.